It was the sinking of the Titanic, early last century, that brought the world's attention to the importance of lifeboats and lifeboat exercises. Since then, these exercises have become an accepted part of maritime life. First, with open lifeboats. These were fitted with systems that only released when the boat was in the water, with no load on the falls. This system worked well in calm conditions, but if there was movement of the sea or the ship, there could be problems releasing the lifeboat. To overcome this, on-load release systems were developed. On-load release systems are sophisticated. Their design incorporates many safety features. But to function safely, they need to be operated and maintained correctly. It is essential to have a full working knowledge of your on-load release systems to operate them and maintain them. All on-load release systems include a fore and an aft hook assembly by which the lifeboat is suspended. The hook assemblies are linked by cables to a release handle mechanism operated inside the lifeboat. The mechanical arrangements of this handle mechanism are designed to ensure that both hooks are released at the same time. Most systems feature a hydrostatic release linked to the handle to make certain that it cannot be operated out of the water unless this release is deliberately overridden. We are going to look at the maintenance of on-load release mechanisms. We are going to examine some general principles before dealing with the equipment of 6 different manufacturers. This video is accompanied by a workbook that is an essential part of the training package and should be read by everyone involved in maintenance of the system.
The first one is this safety T-pin, which must...
These systems are an essential part of the ship's life-saving equipment, and their regular maintenance by trained personnel is a SOLAS requirement. Take advantage of any manufacturer's course that is available to you. Make sure your ship has all the necessary manuals and make sure you read them. This video is designed to go together with the manufacturer's manuals provided on board. It must be studied in addition to them, not as a replacement for them. Other training material available includes the VideoTel training package, Lifeboat On-Load Release Mechanisms. The maintenance requirements are set by the manufacturer, usually requiring action on a weekly, monthly or quarterly, and an annual basis. The weekly requirement is for a visual inspection of the system. The monthly or quarterly inspection involves either launching the boat or hanging it off so that the major components of the system, the hooks and the release mechanism, can be fully examined, checked for wear, lubricated if necessary, and then reset. If your system requires annual servicing, this generally consists of checking or replacing the diaphragm in the hydrostatic release, if fitted. Whenever carrying out the maintenance, make sure that you wear the right personal protective equipment. Always wear a life jacket and when working outside the lifeboat, a harness secured to a safe point. When the system is new, all the components work well. However, with use, vibration, and the hostile marine environment, items in the system will need to be replaced from time to time. The maintenance is to check that everything is in working order and to see if it needs replacing. In new and properly maintained equipment, the weight of the lifeboat is carried entirely on the hooks. For the system to be safe and to operate properly, it must stay that way. But let's look at what can happen over time. First, with the cam-type systems. As long as the hook face is flat against the cam face, no weight is on the release cables. After repeated releasing of the boat, especially on load, things change. The bottom corner of the hook can be worn away, making it curved. This will transfer some load to the release cables, putting them under load. Things can deteriorate further if effective maintenance is not carried out. With constant vibration and in the corrosive marine environment, the main load-bearing hook pivots can become worn. The weight of the lifeboat pulls down, causing the hook face to ride up the cam face slightly. A system in this state is potentially very dangerous. The cable becomes weak, which can mean that it is liable to break under any shock load. For example, the sudden increase in load caused by one or two people boarding the lifeboat. Similar things can happen in other on-load release systems. All the wear and tear of normal use of the upper part of the assembly can affect the point of release. It is to avoid this state developing that regular maintenance is essential. Under SOLAS, the lifeboat must be launched every 3 months. This provides a good opportunity for routine maintenance. However, many systems require a monthly check of the hook assemblies and the release handle. It's not always possible to launch every month, and then the lifeboat must be hung off. Hanging off means that the load of the lifeboat is transferred from the falls and main hooks to auxiliary suspension points and hanging off wires. No one should be inside the lifeboat while the weight is transferred to the hanging off arrangements. This needs to be done in the best conditions that fit in with operational requirements. There are a wide variety of davit arrangements, but in most of them, hanging off the lifeboat is a standard procedure and is simple if carried out correctly. Always keep to the manufacturer's instructions. Further to that, there are 2 crucial issues. First, check that the hanging off lines are in good condition. Then, connect them to the hook assembly. Make certain that they are not secured to the parts that will be released when the hook is released. The second thing is to avoid putting shock loads on the system while the lifeboat is being hung off. This means using the winch carefully and lowering the lifeboat slowly, so that the hanging off arrangements take the load gradually. If the winch operator cannot always see the lifeboat easily, ensure that there is someone to guide him, who can see both him and the lifeboat. Whatever system is fitted to your ship, the weight of the lifeboat is taken off the fall wires so that they go slack. The same rules apply on winching the boat back up into its normal position. Slowly and carefully, watching the lifeboat closely. Once the lifeboat has been stowed, it's good practice to carry out a weekly inspection to check that the hook arrangements are as they should be. The weekly inspection begins with examining the hook assembly. Check that the fall links are under tension and fully seated in the curve at the highest point of the lower edge of the hook. Make sure that the guard plates are closed. Next, check that the hooks are fully closed and that the cam and hook face are flat against one another. This means looking right inside the hook assembly. If your lifeboats are fitted with cam pin indicators, check that they are correctly aligned. Then, double-check the actual situation by looking inside the hook. Make sure that the cocking levers are at their lowest point, and look for any corrosion or dirt that may have built up, and that could interfere with the action of the hook assembly. Then the same checks must be carried out on the other hook assembly. Examine the cables to ensure that they are not corroded or damaged. The cables and the assembly must be free of paint. Once inside the lifeboat, the release handle is examined to ensure that it is in the fully locked position. For the Mills Titan system, make sure the locating bars are down in their slots and fully behind the operating quadrants attached to the release cables. For both the Tor system and the Mills Titan system, make sure that the safety pin is in place and goes in easily. Make sure the hydrostatic release lever is in its locked position. A torch is useful to visualize its exact position against the release handle. Check all the visible parts of the operating cables for any wear, damage, or corrosion. Last, but not least, make sure that you record your inspection in the ship's maintenance log. The monthly maintenance of the on-load release includes a complete inspection and mechanical check of the hooks and the release mechanism. Before the hooks can be examined, they need to be released. In the water, this is easy, as the hydrostatic release will have activated. If the lifeboat is hung off, the hydrostatic release will have to be overridden. Double-check that the lifeboat is properly secured to the hanging off wires, that the hanging off arrangements are not connected to the main hooks, and that the main falls are slack. Then prepare to override the release by first removing the hydrostatic lever cover, either by undoing the bolts or swinging it open. Remove the safety pin. Next, override the hydrostatic release and operate the release handle according to the manufacturer's instructions. The hooks are usually examined first. Check that each hook can swing clear without binding at the pivot. Look closely for any wear. Your manual will tell you how large the clearances between hook and cam should be. Then, the hooks should be reattached and reset on the fall wires using the cocking levers on the hooks. If any action requires more than normal hand force, it is a likely indication that there are cable problems. Ensure that the hydrostatic release is engaged and refit the cover on the release handle's hydrostatic lever unit. Finally, replace the safety pin. If it does not fit in easily, this is an important indicator of improper resetting. Once the safety pin is in place, the lifeboat can be raised again on the davit. This must be done carefully, avoiding putting shock loads on the system. Once the load is transferred back to the fall wires, the hanging off arrangements can be removed. With the Harding system, sometimes called the revolving or rotating cone system, the weekly inspection of the hooks involves, firstly, checking that the fall wire is in tension and seated in the highest part of the hook, and that the safety pawl is in place. Then, looking down between the side plates, ensure that the open part of the main lock, the revolving cone itself, is at the back of the hook. This position is correct, but the precise position will vary slightly in different systems. The same checks are done on the other hook. When both hooks have been checked, the release mechanism inside the boat is inspected. Make sure that the release spring is free and the mechanism is in position so that the handle cannot be inserted. That's all that needs to be done. These systems do not have a safety pin, as the handle cannot be put into the mechanism before the hydrostatic lock operates or is overridden. For the monthly maintenance, the lifeboat needs to be either in the water or hung off. To hang the boat off, connect the hanging off pendants to the hook assembly. Double check that the lifeboat is properly secured to the hanging off wires and that the hanging off arrangements are not connected to the main hooks. Then lower the lifeboat slowly. Then, prepare to override the release by first removing the hydrostatic lever cover. Next, override the hydrostatic release by pulling it, and operate the release handle according to the manufacturer's instructions. The hooks are usually examined first. Check that each hook can swing clear without binding at the pivot. Look closely for any wear. If there are any problems, note them and report them. Then, grease the hook assemblies thoroughly. Then, reset the hooks and reconnect the full wires. The lifeboat can then be hauled back up. Finally, ensure that the hydrostatic release is engaged. Refit the cover and disconnect the hanging off wires. With the cam-safe system made by Norsafe, the weekly inspection of the hooks involves, firstly, checking that the full wire is in tension and seated in the highest part of the hook, and that the safety pawl is in place. Then the position of the cam is checked by examination of the inspection window. It should look like this, with the cam pressing against the hook. If there is any dirt, salt, or corrosion, this must be cleaned off. The same checks are done on the other hook. When both hooks have been checked, the release mechanism inside the lifeboat is inspected. Make sure that the safety pin is in place and that the release handle is in the fully locked position. Then the emergency release lever is inspected to ensure that it is in the green locked position. Double check that the mechanism is neither damaged nor requiring lubrication. For the monthly maintenance, the lifeboat needs to be either in the water or hung off. Once the weight of the lifeboat is on the hanging off wires, prepare to release the hooks by removing the safety pin. Then, swing aside the hydrostatic release lever cover. Next, override the hydrostatic release by pushing the emergency release lever into the off position, the red area. Then, operate the release handle. It's important that the handle operates 100% smoothly. The movement should be checked several times. Smooth movement means that the cables are in good condition. Oil the cables if there is any sign of moisture or salt deposit. Check that each hook can swing clear without binding at the pivot. Look closely for any wear at the cam-hook interface. Then, check that there is very little sideways movement of the hook in the assembly. Once that's done, the hook can be greased. It may be necessary to grease the cable where it is connected to the hook. First, remove the cover. Gloves will need to be taken off for this. To avoid the risk of saltwater corrosion, this should not be done when the boat is in the water. The full wire link is replaced in the hook. Then, the second hook is checked. Then, the release handle is operated to engage the hook. Ensure that the hydrostatic release is back in the on position. At this stage, the hooks are checked to ensure that they are engaged. Then, the safety pin is replaced in the release handle, and the lifeboat can be lifted up and stowed. Once the procedure is complete and the lifeboat stowed, the maintenance log must be filled in. With the Hattika system, the weekly inspection starts by checking that the link is correctly positioned in the hook. Check that the long link to the fall is straight and is at the aft point of the hook. Then, the indicator at the side of the hook assembly is checked. This shows the cam or locking bolt position, and the mark on the disc must be no more than 5 degrees off the corresponding mark on the hook assembly. Then the position of the cam against the hook is double-checked by looking inside the hook assembly. The cam must be directly against the hook. Ensure that the safety pawl is fully closed to prevent the link slipping out. Both hooks must be checked. Once inside, the release handle is checked. First, that it is in the secured position, then that the safety pin is in place and easy to move. The hydrostatic release is confirmed as being locked and should look like this. Its safety glass must be intact. Finally, record your inspection in the ship's maintenance log. If you have found any defects, be sure to note them in the report and notify a senior officer. The regular maintenance is done every 3 months while the boat is in the water after its 3-monthly launching. Once the weekly checks have been done, including checking the position of the cams or locking bolts, the boat is lowered to the water. The hydrostatic release operates, opening up. The release lever is operated slowly so that the simultaneous release of the 2 hooks can be checked visually. The release handle is operated a few times to verify its free movement. This checks that the cables are in good condition. Then, the action of the 2 hook assemblies is checked by opening each hook by hand and seeing if it returns by itself to the correct position. The hook is cleaned and the face of it checked for wear. Then, the cam inside the assembly is examined for wear. Once done, the free movement of the safety pawl is checked before the hook is reset and the long link inserted. Once the lifeboat has been stowed, the hook assemblies are greased. At this stage, the weekly checks should be repeated to double-check that everything is as it should be. With the FASMA system, weekly inspection starts by checking that the hook is correctly located. On lower weight lifeboat systems, this is done by checking that the triangle marking on the hook is lined up with the notch on the assembly. With higher weight lifeboat systems, check that no part of the hook is visible through the inspection hole. Then check that the release bolt is in its locked position. Its marking must correspond to the green OK arrow on the case. Next, check that the long link to the fall is straight and is at the aft point of the hook. Ensure that the safety pawl is fully closed to prevent the link slipping out. Both hooks must be checked. Once inside, the release handle is checked. First, that it is in the secured position, then that the shackle bolt is closed and that the safety glass is intact. Ensure that the safety hook of the hydrostatic release is totally closed and that the indicator shows red. Finally, record your inspection in the ship's maintenance log. If you have found any defects, be sure to note them in the report and notify a senior officer. The regular maintenance is done every 3 months while the boat is in the water, after its 3-monthly launching. Once the weekly checks have been done, the boat is lowered to the water. The hydrostatic release operates, changing the indicator to green. The release lever is operated slowly so that the simultaneous release of the 2 hooks can be checked visually. The bolts around the hook assembly are checked. The release handle is operated a few times to verify its free movement. This checks that the cables are in good condition. Then, the action of the 2 hook assemblies is checked by opening each hook by hand and seeing if it returns by itself to the correct position. Then the interlock safety device is checked by holding the hook a little open and seeing if the release handle can be returned to the closed position. If there is resistance, the device is operating correctly. After reconnecting the hooks and lifting the lifeboat out of the water, the hydrostatic release indicator is watched to check that it returns to red. Once the lifeboat has been stowed, the hook assemblies are greased. In some systems, the hydrostatic release has a diaphragm. This diaphragm must be serviced once a year. To do this requires taking the hydrostatic unit apart, and this can only be done while the lifeboat is hung off. Its correct maintenance is very important. It requires trained personnel taking care and paying close attention to the manufacturer's manuals. The idea is to disconnect the hydrostatic release from the system. Then, remove the top of it and remove the diaphragm. Generally, the diaphragm is replaced every year with these systems. Be certain that you are replacing it with the correct manufacturer's replacement part. Check the cable for free movement. Then, if everything is as it should be, reassemble the release according to the manufacturer's instructions. The principles of good maintenance of lifeboat on-load release systems are the same as for all maintenance tasks. First, understand why the maintenance needs to be done, and then learn how to do it. Proper training is essential for the maintenance of these systems and is mandatory under SOLAS. If the manufacturer's manuals are not available on your ship, ask the master to get new copies well before the maintenance becomes due. Then there will be time to read them and remind yourself of what is required before starting. Never attempt any maintenance without reference to the manufacturer's manuals. And always use the components with the correct specifications from the original manufacturer. Carry out the maintenance strictly according to the manufacturer's recommendations. Keep to the scheduling required by SOLAS. Always record the inspections and maintenance procedures in the ship's maintenance logs. There is a 5-yearly test of the lifeboat system required by SOLAS, but this can only be done in a shipyard and should not be undertaken by ship's personnel.
Open the cover.
With good maintenance, these lifeboats will be able to serve their purpose effectively, saving lives in an emergency. Proper maintenance of the release gear of the lifeboat is a vitally important job. Make sure that you give it the attention and care it deserves.